Welcome once again to a virtual tutorial class courtesy of the Darrang College e-learning platform. Today's class is meant for the first semester English course students, and the topic that we have selected today is, as you see on the board, medieval romance. So by the end of this class we shall grasp what medieval romances are. The adjective medieval, of course, poses no problems for us. Medieval just means the time period. It's about chronology. It was in the medieval period in Europe that these romances originated and developed and flourished, first in France and then to other countries, including England. Let us, at the beginning, try to understand the popular meaning of the word romance. In contemporary parlance, romance refers to a love story, or the excitement and mystery about love, or an idealized story about love. That is what we mean by romance. That is the popular meaning. Again, by romance we also refer to certain languages like French, Italian, Spanish. These are languages that evolved out of Latin, which was a Roman language. Hence, these languages today are called Romance languages. So these are the meanings of the word romance that we usually get. Now, these meanings have evolved over time, and we shall see the association of these popular meanings with the evolution of the word romance in the course of our class itself. First of all, let's go to the etymology of the word romance. Etymology, is the study of the origin of words and their evolution. And this itself is an interesting topic actually, how words evolve, how they originate and how they develop. Language is dynamic. It keeps on changing. You cannot fix language to a position. That is one of the characteristics of language. Words change with time. Certain words become obsolete. They are no longer used. New words come into a language, and certain words become archaic. They are used only for special purposes. Plus, more interestingly, words change their meanings. Let me give you an example, nothing to do with romance, an example to understand how meanings change. The word manufacture. Today, the meaning of manufacture is to produce on a large scale using machinery. But you will be really interested to know that earlier manufacture actually meant man-made or handmade. So see how the word remains, but the meaning has changed. It has actually taken a 360-degree turn. So that is very interesting about vocabulary, interesting about language. Now let's deal with the etymology of romance. It has also changed over time, the meaning of the word romance. Originally, romance meant the French language, because the French language evolved out of Latin, which was a Roman language. And that is why today other languages which evolved out of Latin, including French, are called Romance languages. So you see the connection now. The other connection with love also we shall find out. So initially, romance signified the French language. Later, that meaning evolved into something else. Now it is not the language that is called romance, but writings in the French language. From the French language being called romance, later we had writings in the French language being called romances. And then there was another change. First, the language itself, French language, is called romance. Then writings in French were called romances. Then not all writings, but a particular kind of writing in the French language came to be called romances. Of course, later on, a particular kind of writing in all languages came to be called romances. That particular kind of writing, which originated in the medieval period, is the topic of our discussion, medieval romance. So medieval romance is a genre. It belongs to the narrative genre. That is, it is a tale, it is a story. So medieval romances, which developed first in France in the 12th century, then spread to other countries, including England. In England, the romances were first written in the French language after the Norman conquest, and later on written in English as well. Now this is, as we said, a genre or a type of literature, type of writing, and it is a narrative genre. It tells a tale. It's a comparatively long tale. What kind of a tale it is? It is a tale of adventure. So medieval romances were tales of adventure, adventure and thrill. Whose adventure? So medieval romances dealt with the adventures of a knight, and we know knights played an important role in medieval feudal society, and they played an important role in literature as well, as we see here. So a medieval romance is a type of narrative which presents the adventures of a knight. And initially these romances were in verse, that is, they were poetic. They were written in verse, but later on romances were written in prose as well. So it's a narrative in prose or verse about a knight's adventure. So a medieval romance had adventures piled one upon the other. It was originally in verse, later on also in prose. Now these medieval romances are also called chivalric romances. So medieval romance and chivalric romance, same. Now where does the word chivalry comes from? Now the French word for knight is chevalier, and romances through the quest and adventures of the knight actually depict the knightly codes of conduct. And those knightly codes of conduct from the French word chevalier are called chivalric codes of conduct. So romances are narratives which depict chivalry, knightly codes of conduct, knightly behavior. Hence they are also called chivalric romances. And knightly codes of conduct were very important during the medieval periods. A knight, we know, is a soldier on horseback, but that was not the only qualification. A knight had to follow certain codes of behavior. He had to have certain qualities like courage, honor, justice, protecting the weak, righting wrongs, being loyal to his lord, fighting for his faith. These are qualities which a knight has to have to be called a knight. Interestingly, today we talk about chivalric behavior. When someone is, say, excessively kind or polite towards women, though that is why does that happen? Because one of the qualities that a knight should have was that he should protect the weak. And in the medieval period, though it is not acceptable now, in the medieval period all women were considered to be weak, so it was his duty to protect the women. Even now we call women the weaker sex. So when people are more kind or polite towards women, we use the word chivalry or chivalry. So those were knightly codes of conduct, and those knightly codes of conduct were reflected in the chivalric romances, in the medieval romances. Hence they were called chivalric romances. Now these romances were a kind of aristocratic literature. The elites of the society actually patronized, and they enjoyed this kind of incredible tales. These are incredible adventures, unbelievable tales. The adventures of the knight fighting with monsters and other beasts, and supernatural elements were very much present in the romances. And these supernatural elements were not in the form of gods and goddesses like in the epics, for example, but supernatural in the form of magic, charms and enchantments. So these are incredible adventures. These are quests of knights, and such writings of the medieval period were called chivalry romances. Now these chivalric romances usually had a love element in it. They had a love angle. The knight went on quests and adventures. He was ready to stake everything in the adventure to get the favor of a lady. So the knight's love for a lady is a secondary theme in the romances. And to get the reciprocation of love from the lady, he was ready to go on any adventure. It was a kind of spiritualized love where the lady is worshipped actually as a goddess, and the knight is ready to do anything for her. And this kind of love involved rituals and kinds of proper behavior, and that concept of love, which is present in the romances as well as other medieval lyrics, is what is called courtly love. So medieval romances had knightly adventures, so they were called chivalric romances. It also usually 9 out of 10 times it had a love story integral to the plot. That is why romances are usually connected with love. Though remember, love or courtly love, whatever, was not a compulsory element of the romances. Compulsory element is only chivalry. But because most of the times romances had a love element, we now go back to our popular meaning we talked about at the very beginning. That is why we relate romances with love stories. So we have traced the development of the word romance, and now we have a fair idea of what these medieval romances were. Now medieval romance is important for us because we are studying in unit 1 of your paper the literary and social history of England. There 1066, the Norman conquest, is a very important epoch-making event. The Norman conquest brought French culture into England. The Old English, Anglo-Saxon or Germanic culture now comes into contact with Romance culture or French culture. Literature was influenced, English literature was influenced to a great extent by these French elements. One of the new literary forms that appears in English literature after the Norman conquest, that is in the Middle English period after 1066, is this romance. Romance is imported into England from France, like rhyme as well. So both romance and rhyme, and later on reason as well, had a French contribution. In that sense, medieval romance is a very important topic for us. So I hope this class has been helpful in giving you a substantial idea of what romances were. And in succeeding classes we shall deal with different categories of romances. Romances have been classified based on their matter or subject matter. Those classifications we shall do in another of our classes. Today's class was about medieval romances, the popular meaning of the romance, love, and those languages evolving out of Latin. Then we went to the etymology, how the French language was first called romance, then writings in the French language, then a particular kind of writing, this medieval romance. This was the etymology or original evolution of the language of the word romance. Then we talked about the genre, that it's a narrative genre, initially in verse, later also in prose. It is a tale of adventure, adventures piled one upon the other, adventures of a knight depicting chivalric codes of conduct, hence chivalric romances. A subsidiary element is courtly love, though not a compulsory element. Usually it is found, so courtly love. Aristocratic literature it is, and the element of supernatural. So that fairly sums up medieval romance. I hope this has been of help. We'll meet again in other virtual classes with related topics. Thank you.